Game plan. NFL Week 7 edition. Dave Lochran, Ben Rasa, welcome. I'm back.
Nice.
Glad to be back. What's that?
It's nice to have you back. It's certainly good.
Thanks, bud. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be back. Uh, I wanted to say, too, I appreciate to everybody that reached out to me during a difficult time like this. It means more than you could have ever known. I'll tell you that much, and I mean that 100%. Not bullshitting you. That's the truth. Definitely helped a lot. But we're back. We got week 7 upon us, and enough of my nonsense. Let's jump right into it. What do you say, Ben?
Yes, sir. 10-game slate. This is going to be interesting because I actually really like the slate. So when that happens, it's usually even worse than typical. So I don't know. I'm pretty excited actually for this garbage slate.
So what is it about the slate that you like so much then?
You ever get those slates where you have a good feel of where the ownership is going to be, and you're not just fading it because you're making a stand. You just naturally kind of like other plays.
Sure.
And, there's also the slates where you have a team and you got 6,000 left and the guy you want is 6,100. Like, this is the kind of slate I have 6,000 left and the guy I want is 5,900. Like, everything is clicking. It just feels like a perfect puzzle. That usually ends poorly, but I am actually pretty excited.
All right, good. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into it then. We've got 10 games, which makes this a little bit easier too. I like the 10 gamers, by the way. I always enjoy the 10 gamers.
Yeah.
Tampa Bay and Cleveland. Really the only thing that you hear about now is Nick Chubb. And Nick Chubb is super cheap, no surprise. 3,600. What is he, like 45 or something on FanDuel? He's ground floor cheap, and you know that the popularity level is through the roof. No surprise. The first question before we get into anything else from this game, because there's a whole lot to talk about from this game in general, is what are you doing with Nick Chubb? We've got a 52.5 over under, the highest on the week. Quite frankly, Tampa Bay's run defense hasn't been nearly as bad as their pass defense, but it's still a bad defense. What are you doing with Nick Chubb?
Yeah, so this is honestly, I know it's our first game. This is one of the most important decisions on the entire slate.
Yeah.
Cash, I'm playing him. I think it's pretty obvious. You just plug him in. Tournaments, obviously, where it gets a little trickier. I'm not saying that it's a big stand because I don't think it's necessary to do that where it's like, oh, I'm playing 0% Chubb. But I did move a good amount to Duke Johnson. I don't think it's a given that Chubb just becomes Carlos Hyde in terms of volume. Duke Johnson, the volume has been the only thing that's holding him back. So I think that I don't mind taking some stabs there. And like you talked about, before this news came out, Baker, Njoku, Landry, those were the guys that everyone was looking to on the Browns. It kind of feels like they're taking a back seat because of this news when maybe they shouldn't be.
Yeah, because again, I'm not saying that this is some like brick wall Tampa Bay run defense, right? Because that's not the case. No. But they have not been the pass defense, put it that way. Because when you look at this team, they've been decimated through the air. Outside of that, it hasn't been that. They haven't been like, what was it? Against Tampa Bay, or I'm sorry, against Atlanta. Tevin Coleman wasn't exactly good against them, right? Like Tevin Coleman was actually, outside of that one touchdown, what he finished with like 10 fantasy points. Ito Smith had scored, but outside of that, no real efficiency. So yeah, obviously Nick Chubb and Cash is a staple, but I've had the same concern as you. Am I right about it? I don't know. I could be wrong, but it does kind of feel like, everyone's expecting Nick Chubb to jump into a role where he's seeing 20 plus carries. Is it possible? Sure, it's possible. But I guess what I'm asking you, Ben, if it was possible and we wanted to feed him that many touches, wouldn't we have been giving him more than 3 snaps a game through the first 6 weeks of the season?
Exactly. It just feels like a situation where everyone is assuming it's just a straight replacement of Hyde. And I don't think that's the case. I really don't. It's not to say, obviously, he's getting an uptick in work. He may approach that, but Duke Johnson, first of all, obviously he's the pass catching guy, and you mentioned it. The way to just Tampa's run defense, no, it's not great, but that's not the game plan either. They're not coming in saying we're going to run it down Tampa's throat. I really don't think that's the optimal move there. So Chubb, of course, could get some work. He could find the end zone, and at 3,800, you don't need much. But at the same time, the ownership we know is going to be there. There's plenty of other options on the Browns themselves if you want exposure to that game.
All right, so let's talk about the rest of this game then, because Tampa Bay's pass defense, Tampa Bay's defense in general is flat out garbage. I mean, this is just a bad defense. We've seen them carved up by pretty much everyone they play. They rank 32nd in pass defense DVOA this season. And interestingly enough, if you look at where they rank against individual positions, they are 29th against tight ends, allowing almost 100 yards per game to opposing tight ends. They are 30th against opposing running backs. They're 22nd against wide receiver ones, 28th against wide receiver twos. There really isn't a single element of this pass defense, whether it be tight end, outside receivers, slot receivers, that they've been good against.
And that's kind of what makes it tricky in a sense of how to attack the Browns. I know it's not the greatest advice, but I really do recommend a mix and match. I have plenty of Baker to Njoku. I have some Baker to Landry. I have some Duke Johnson. And I do have some Nick Chubb because I think that obviously at 3,800, he's in play. But putting all your eggs in this basket of, I'm just going to play Nick Chubb, he's going to get 25 touches, and they're going to ride him to victory, I don't see that narrative playing out.
Yeah, neither do I. And I think what I'm doing, though, in this case is, how much Baker do you have? Because last week, I didn't have any Baker Mayfield. And you know what? I'll be honest. You and I we differed on Njoku, and I'll give you the W on that. Although to some extent, I'm taking a half W because that was a garbage time touchdown.
Fair. That's
but at the same time, still a solid game. He was targeted 12 times, so you were right there. But you have David Njoku, you have Jarvis Landry, who, look, Jarvis has been targeted quite frequently by Baker, but they don't exactly have the chemistry right now. I mean, they're not exactly hooking up, right? I mean, he had a long reception of 7 yards last week. I think interesting plays are guys like Callaway and these guys that have been super underwhelming, but at least in tournaments we know have that big play upside where one play could make all of the difference. So I guess I'm trying to look at this from a slightly different viewpoint here, because we know how popular Landry is going to be, and we know how popular Njoku is going to be, and for good reason, of course. But I do think Callaway has some appeal here if you're trying to get different in tournaments in a game that's going to be probably the most popular on the slate.
Yeah, don't mind that. We've seen, in weeks past, it's not just nailing the right game. It's being kind of contrarian within the right stack. The Packers and Lions come to mind. A lot of people, me included, I stacked that game. The game was up and down, and I got it completely wrong because I just had the wrong pieces. So yeah, someone like Callaway, who the volume is almost, it's not irrelevant, but you just talked about it. He's in the Travis Benjamin bucket of you're looking for 3 catches for $110 and a touchdown, Robbie Anderson against the Broncos style. And that's very possible against
nailed that.
Against that. Yeah, I'll have to bank on that when I can. But yeah, against a Swiss cheese defense like this, there's definitely home run upside for a burner like that.
Yeah, no doubt. So there you have it. I mean, I think there are plenty of different ways to go here. In terms of your ownership, where are you highest on Cleveland?
Probably against the field, it's going to be Duke Johnson. I have a good amount of him. I have about 20% Baker, which I don't know exactly where that's going to fall in terms of against the field. I do like some other quarterbacks. I think this is a week where you can kind of pay down at QB. So I the popular options, I won't have great leverage. I do like Duke, I think, a little more than most. My question, though, is Mike Evans on the other side. I don't know exactly what to do running it back if that's what I kind of choose to do.
Yeah, that's the question. Where do you run it back with is where I was going. It was where I was going next with you.
I don't know. I mean, obviously Mike Evans is their best weapon. You have Godwin. Peyton Barber is like a pretty interesting alternative to Chubb. They're the same price, but I don't feel great there. Cleveland's defense, as much as we like to make fun of the old Brownies, they're good units. So I want to run it back here and there, but I don't think you can attack the Bucs at will.
Yeah, I don't think you can either. And I guess another thing too is they do have, their cornerback play is not that bad.
Mm-hmm.
So where are you looking here? Do you want to, because you had to figure Mike Evans is going to see a lot of Ward, right? And Ward has been pretty solid. So I don't know. I guess we'll see. I think I'm probably going to go away from Evans here. I might even look at a little bit of Deshaun Jackson because he's another one of those types where all you need is one. The problem is paying that much for him makes me feel a little sick to my stomach.
Yeah, it's a premium price. Now, obviously, he can blow it out of the water. There's just a lot of risk there.
Yep. Absolutely. And last week, you got a good game from Peyton Barber, but literally his first good game of the season. That was literally his first decent game of the year.
Yeah, that was he caught not a fluky touchdown, but that really helped at the end there. So got to be careful with the Bucs, but going to be a popular game. There's some other ones on the slate though that I do like.
All right. Any interest in Winston?
No, not for me. Just too many quarterbacks that I'm kind of into to get him in.
All right, then let's move on. Carolina and Philadelphia. Here's another 1:00 game. You have Wentz and Newton. Each time these teams play each other, it's generally pretty low scoring games. You're seeing like 24-21. It's not often that you see these scores get blown out of the water. Now, Carolina's defense has been pretty underwhelming. I can say that much. I mean, you look recently, and they've coughed up some pretty decent numbers to some pretty I can't even think of the word, man. So I'm still in a fog from this week, but some offenses that aren't exactly imposing, right?
Yeah, the Giants are in there. Like they move the ball in Carolina.
Right. I mean, I still don't know how much I love from this game though. Christian McCaffrey I think is always in play, but the problem here is that, unless you're Saquon Barkley, you're going to have a very tough time moving the ball on the ground against the Philadelphia Eagles. I really think he's the only running back all season that has cracked 100 yards rushing against them, or in the past, 15, 16 games. They really do a very solid job of stopping you on the ground, which means you have to resort to the air.
It's tricky, yeah. I mean, you're right. McCaffrey always in play. Not unnecessary. That's not the right word. It's hard to really go there and feel confident. There's a lot of red flags. So much as, and I think they're going to be pretty popular, Eagles defense, sub 3K is definitely something that I'm looking at for some salary relief. And then I'm on your boy, Carson Wentz, kind of shaking off the rust. He's quietly putting it together again. Got a good string going, no picks, throwing multiple touchdowns in each game. You mentioned Carolina's defense is not, I don't think, even remotely good at this point. They've been pretty bad. So don't mind Wentz. Ertz, of course, if you can pay for him. Even Alshon, another decent mid-range target for the wide receivers.
Dude, I think Alshon, I mentioned this on Three Fellas Talking Football with you and Andrew, was it 2 weeks ago now?
Mm-hmm.
That Alshon Jeffrey is like, this dude is so much better, I think, than he's given credit for. I think since he's come to Philly and, since he was injured in Chicago, people forget exactly how talented he is. And he's the type of guy that if you pepper him with targets, which the Eagles need to do, and they did last week, you're going to win games and you're going to win them handily because this is not a guy that drops a lot of passes, and he's someone that can take a very difficult catch and a bad-looking throw and turn it into a reception. I'm a big fan of Jeffrey, and I do think at 6,300, this is a pretty reasonable price point. I like that. And another thing, you mentioned Carson Wentz. I don't know how much I'm going to have of him this week. I don't think I'm going to load up on him. I don't think I like him as much as you do, but I do think he's in play. The one thing about him, if he has even a decent pocket, right? If he has even decent protection in the pocket, you're not going to see Carson Wentz make any mistakes at all. It's the fact that he had the first game or two that he returned, Carson Wentz had not 1-2 seconds in the pocket before he's on the ground. There was no protection there, and it's really hard for any quarterback to get it out that quick. But you have to figure that with the running backs they have here, Clement, Smallwood, I won't even include Josh Adams, who I remember people were like, he's going to get 6 to 10 touches. Well, he didn't see a snap, right? I think those are your two guys. It does make a guy like Wentz or like Alshon Jeffrey and of course always Zach Ertz pretty interesting options.
Definitely. Like them both. Like I said, I am higher on Wentz than you are. I think he's in discussion for cash, to be honest. And pairing him with either of those guys makes total sense to me when they're seeing double-digit targets, and they both are kind of consistently, especially Ertz at this point. Their floors are just so high, and they find the end zone frequently. I don't see many red flags there.
For sure. No, I think Wentz is a perfectly fine play too. I do like Alshon too, especially if he's going to be seeing Bradbury. That guy, I don't know, he seems pretty overrated. I just seen so many bad plays from James Bradbury that it doesn't scare me much. And Alshon Jeffrey's a big enough body that he can come down with anything you put near him. Now, what do you do on the other side of this game with the Panthers?
I don't have much. The one guy, and this is kind of just a buy low spot because I think we know his price is going to rise, is Greg Olsen. If you want to get away from Njoku, he came back last week and he played a lot more snaps than I thought he would. So I assume we see him out there a ton, and the usage is going to go up. The price is going to go up. Don't mind that. Not a lot of Funchess interest. Not a lot of McCaffrey, as we talked about. Cam, he's a quarterback for sure in play behind a lot of guys for me this week, though.
For sure. By the way, chat is popping right now. Appreciate all you guys in here watching. Nice. And hit us. What's that, Ben?
I said nice. Glad to hear that.
Yeah, nice. Not bad, huh? Hit us with a like if you don't mind. It's always something that we appreciate, and we love you guys for it. Maybe we'll even send you a gift basket in the mail. Unlikely. I say that because somebody just sent me a basket from Hickory Farms, a cheese box, a meat and cheese box, Ben, from Hickory Farms. I don't know anyone from Hickory Farms.
Okay. That's not a bad gift, though. A little pepper jack action, salted meats. That's a recipe for some profit for sure. It's never.
It absolutely is. Mm-hmm. I'll have to find their address and shoot them back a thank you for that. But yeah, from Jason to Clay to Hunter to Kevin to Bravia, we got a bunch of people in chat. It's popping here. You guys got questions? We'll be happy to answer them as we get to those games. Ben, let's move on then. Let's talk Minnesota, New York Jets. Interesting one here. Adam Thielen. Does he ever come back down to earth, or is this dude just living on the moon? No, serious question.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
His floor is 28 and his ceiling is like 33. It's just it's insane. I don't know what's going on with this guy. If he's coming back down to earth, it'll be this week because I am really on him. I had little pieces here and there. I really took the bait this week, and we'll see it. He just seems immune, though. He gets double-digit targets every week, returns value. It's hard to imagine him not having another good game against the Jets defense. I know it's windy. I'm in New York. It is windy here. Wind is blowing, but for a guy like that, I don't think it's that big a deal, to be honest. Maybe a couple deep balls are affected for Cousins, not overly changing my narrative based on that.
Yeah, and in Philly, you get the 15-mile-per-hour winds too. But, I've talked to you about this a lot. We've been doing football shows together for a little while now. I really try not to let weather impact my decisions unless it's really, really serious. And the reason I say that is the more often I fade guys based on weather, the more often it bites me in the ass. And I think you would agree. It's just you can only get too cute when it comes to weather. These are professional football players. The Philadelphia Eagles, this entire team's been playing in cold weather, windy weather for long enough. 15-mile-per-hour winds. I'm not too worried about that. Not to mention that this isn't a Philly team just backing up for a second because there are winds here. Quite frankly, the same winds were projected in Philly and in New York. I mean, you're not talking about like Wentz can only produce if he's throwing the deep ball, Yeah,
sometimes it actually helps because they keep it simple. And the thing about reacting to weather, and then we can get back to the game, is more often than not what happens is the public overreacts. And you actually do yourself a disservice. You can get guys that marginally, or sometimes, depending on what it is, massively under-owned because everybody moved off them. I mean, I've had multiple questions this morning, and they're reasonable questions, of course, saying, Are you moving off guys like Jermaine Kearse, off Thielen? And I'm sure a lot of people will because of the wind. And could it bite me if I stay on them? Of course. But more often than not, you actually get a nice little ownership discount on a game that's pretty much unaffected.
Yeah, for sure. Look, if you're moving, here's the thing: if you're moving off a certain player because of the win, you should be moving on to another player because of the win. And I mean this in all sincerity, right? If you're moving off a Robbie Anderson, well, Jermaine Kearse runs 78% of his slot or of his snaps in the slot, right?
Yeah.
And Quincy Nunn was out. So you're not going to convince me that 15 to 20 mile per hour winds are going to highly impact intermediate, 7 to 10 yard routes across the middle of the field.
Yep. If anything, like I said, I think it can actually help a guy. I don't think Kearse needs any help because he's going to see a boatload of targets. But Robbie Anderson, you just mentioned his name. He's someone, if you do think it's going to be windy, and I think it would, it could be affected. I mean, he's a burner. Those are deep balls, but I am not overly changing what I'm doing with guys like Jermaine Kearse or Thielen.
For sure. By the way, somebody saw me vaping and said something, and Fantasy Horse says, if you're anti-tobacco, you're anti-America.
Fantasy Horse is a great name. If I don't win the Miller today, I hope Fantasy Horse is up there. That's a good name.
Absolutely. Someone also asked, why aren't we talking about Shady? I have a good answer for that. And I promise I would tell you why. Because we haven't gotten to the game yet. And when we do, I promise we will have a boatload of information for you. Don't you worry. But, Jermaine Kearse, I don't like playing bad chalk. I actually don't think Jermaine Kearse is bad chalk here, just because this is the type of guy, and I'm talking about in cash, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
In cash, Kearse should be able to give you, 6 for 60 or something. I wouldn't be surprised. I think you're not talking about a monster ceiling here, but in terms of a floor, you have to figure Kearse has a decent floor here, and you also have to assume that Minnesota puts enough points on the board to keep Sam Darnold throwing.
I'm with you. I have him in cash. I feel pretty comfortable with it, to be honest. You can always, it's the NFL, crazy stuff happens, but it's hard to imagine the volume's not there. And when you're 4,100, you'll kind of just live with that volume.
So let's make a final judgment here. How much are we allowing the wind to affect us in each of the last 2 games we've discussed?
It hasn't taken me off the guys that I originally wanted to target, which were Alshon Ertz, Thielen, and Jermaine Kearse.
Okay, good. I just want to get that out of the way because it's obviously a question that, as you know, we've already been asked a lot of.
Yep.
Anything else on this game?
Not really. If you are making a bunch of teams and you say, you know what, everyone's going to Thielen, I'm going to go to Diggs, I don't fault you for it. I totally get that logic. Not sure I'm going to get there. I make 20-ish teams. So yeah, not too much else. Cousins, if you want to get aggressive, but again, not rolling the dice there too much.
All right, well then let's go ahead and move on here. I'm trying to enter some more lineups as we go along. Dude, it's been a long week. I'm trying to get them all in. Usually I enter everything on like Thursday or Friday. Mm-hmm. Detroit and Miami, Ben, got Matthew Stafford at the helm, and wouldn't you know it, the Millionaire Maker winner Brock Osweiler for the Miami Dolphins. Now, I'm of the belief that lightning generally doesn't strike in the same spot twice, especially not with Brock Osweiler and Albert Wilson. I mean, if you saw, and I know you did, those Albert Wilson touchdowns, particularly the last one, he had some nice breakaway speed, beautiful, couple of nice spin moves out of it, towards the sideline. But I mean, you're talking about like an average depth of target of like 4 yards on each of those touchdowns. Like the guy's not, these were manufactured touchdowns from Wilson with a lot of broken tackles and some surprisingly porous defensive play by Chicago there. Are you going back to I can't believe I'm asking you this, but are you going back to not that you ever went to the well with these 2 guys last week, but are you going to the well with an Osweiler or an Albert Wilson this week?
No. No, I was never in the well. I would be actually in the well.
Okay.
Not happening. Albert Wilson, he is actually very impressive. He catches a pop pass and he takes it 80 yards
It
frequently,
is.
it feels like.
It is really. Like, say what you want about the guy, but it has been impressive to see what he's done with what little opportunity he's had and what little snaps he's had as well.
That's the thing. When you look at it, and it's an important distinction. Like realistically, I'm not going to say it's Tariq Cohen-esque. We'll get to him, but he just doesn't have that many out. He is making the most of every single touch. Can he keep doing that? Of course he can. But I'm not going to jump on a guy who's going to have, not that he's going to be popular, but he's not going to have no ownership anymore after what we just saw. It doesn't seem like a great spot. Obviously, Brock Osweiler, I would never jump on. That's not going to happen. So I get Albert Wilson. It is very impressive. But for me, it's still a spot where the risk totally outweighs the reward.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat. To me, it isn't sensible here. And another reason too is when price tags come up on guys like that, it kind of makes the decision a little bit easier,
Yeah, price tag and again ownership. It's not that it's going to get to a crazy level, but it's going to rise. We've seen the game logs, and when you play like that, like I said, as impressive as it is, if Chicago tackles him a couple times, that stat line is just worlds different. It's tough to bank on him breaking really long shake, those type of runs. He's a great player to do it, but I can't really bank on that.
So what are you doing with this game? Because you do have Detroit on the other side, and that isn't to say, even though Miami won last week, it isn't to say that they didn't give up, a decent chunk of production to this Chicago team either.
No, this is a game I think you can target. I don't have much on the Miami side. I can't get Drake right. He fumbled and over. I just can't really go there with him and Gore. But on the Lions side, this is where I could get into big trouble, or maybe it'll turn out good. I was on him early in the week, and now Riddick is ruled out. I really like Kerryon Johnson today.
So do I.
Okay, so we're definitely sunk. This could be bad. But I just think that with Riddick out, the volume should be somewhat solidified. We've seen him be impressive. I'm not worried about Miami's defense. 4,500. It's all systems go for me. I hope he picks up some of that passing work. I think he's the lead back. Hopefully Blunt they don't get stopped at the 1-inch line twice like we saw. But this seems like a pretty good spot for a guy that I know he's getting some buzz because Riddick is ruled out, but it's a pretty good sub 5K target for running backs.
I think so too. Yeah. I absolutely think so. And another thing too is when you're talking about just plain ownership projections. I mean, Nick Chubb is going to be. What do you think his ownership's going to be? Because I see numbers. I've been seeing some different projections where I look, but in different spots. But there's no doubt that Nick Chubb's going to be popular. And another thing too that I just wanted to point out. You know how we always talk about if you play this guy, it forces your hand into your lineup looking a lot like this. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're playing Nick Chubb, you're playing Todd Gurley.
Yep.
Like, at least that's the mentality of almost anyone you've spoken to, right?
Yeah.
So, Kerryon Johnson will definitely have some ownership, but he's going to be significantly lower owned than Nick Chubb. And I think you're crazy to say, yeah, but Nick Chubb has a way higher ceiling and floor than Kerryon Johnson. I don't believe either of those statements. Now, again, just this is, please let me be as transparent as possible. This is not to say that I don't like Nick Chubb. No, it's to say that Nick Chubb isn't the only value running back that can do the job you need for him at that price point. Is that fair enough?
Absolutely. I'm with you. I mean, Kerryon Johnson, this is what happens too, and I don't want to go on a long tangent, but when news breaks late, it takes on more. People remember what just happened. And if the order of operations were different and Riddick got ruled out this morning, Kerryon Johnson would have a lot more steam, in my opinion. But everyone's flavor of the week, Carlos Hyde just got traded, Nick Chubb. And I get he's a little cheaper. But when you're talking about ownership, it's going to be really high, and probably for good reason, especially in cash. You can look to alternatives like Kerryon Johnson in tournaments. I'm doing that, rolling the dice, and we'll see what happens. Because last thing I'll say, you talked about it.
Exactly. Yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
My headphones looks like these trusty AirPods disconnected on me. Can you hear me, Ben?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
You can hear me fine. All right, good. Because I couldn't hear you for a second, but I think we're good. Anything else on this game before we move on that you want to touch on?
No, I mean, the receivers for the Lions are always tricky. You can go to Tate. I don't mind that. But for me, it's going to be on Johnson and hope that he gets a workhorse type volume.
That's where I'm at too.
All right.
Because I think outside of that, you're pigeonholing yourself into making a decision that everyone else is going to make. And again, Nick Chubb gonna have a bunch, but we can still go a lot of different ways here and make good lineups without him. And that's what I think that's one of the reasons you mentioned at the top. That's one of the reasons I really like this slate, is because I can differentiate and feel pretty good about it.
That's the same with me. There's a lot of options, and that makes it fun. I'm not just forcing it in saying, oh, I want to get away from chalk just to get away from chalk. That's usually not a good idea. Today, I'm naturally driven to a couple different builds and avoid the funnel lineup construction like you talked about, because the correlation between Nick Chubb and Gurley today is going to be massive.
For sure. Adam Dorn says, Laffy, great to see you, man. Thanks, man. Good to be back. Appreciate all of you guys. He said, I think it's crazy. Do you think it's crazy to play Duke over Chubb and cash? They seem projected close. Think Duke catches more. Talking DraftKings, not FanDuel. I'll let Ben answer too. I don't think it's necessary in cash. Because in cash, you're not looking to get that leverage, that differentiation and the edge. But in tournaments, Ben said it already that, yes, Duke over Chubb and cash makes plenty of sense. Or
yeah.
in tournaments,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, the only way I would do that in cash is if for some reason, and I'm not doing this, you want to make a stand solely against Nick Chubb. And that will be the decision. If Chubb busts and Duke Johnson plays well, you're probably going to crush your double ups. But it seems unnecessary. I don't want to live and die with Nick Chubb. So I will play him and let the rest of my lineup do the talking, because he's going to be massively owned. He won't be the reason you cash or not cash in cash.
Absolutely. Totally agree on that one. And I guess we share the same opinion. We had a lot of differences of opinion last week. So far, we're on the same page, but sometimes differences of opinion can be good. No one wants to tune into a show just to hear everybody. No one wants an echo chamber. Ain't that right, Ben?
That's right. Well, I have a feeling I'm veering off the track soon enough. So
let's make it happen, baby. All right. New England and Chicago. Well, that's why the show is fun, because once in a while, both of us will always have some type of off the reservation, bizarre, outrageous take that, hey, when they work, they pay off big. And when they don't, well, Laffy at Laffy _D at JazzRaz DFS. Right. Feel free to throw some hate our way, or some love. We like that. We appreciate the love, but you know what? We can accept both. New England and Chicago, Brady and Mitchell Trubisky. So on yesterday's SiriusXM show, Ben, I had a guy named Amal Shaw come on. He's on the VSiN network, Vegas Sports Stats and Information Network, on SiriusXM, based, a sports betting channel, and really sharp guy, right? I love having him on as a guest. Try and get him on every couple weeks, and he genuinely makes valid points that the overlap for sports betting and fantasy is just they're so closely intertwined, and it's interesting that with New England, knowing that we're not getting Rob Gronkowski, who didn't travel to Chicago, isn't playing, it really doesn't, first of all, it makes no real difference on the line because of how he's been used anyway. They have so many weapons that are already incorporated into the offense, whether it be Julian Edelman, who we expect to play. He's going to play. Josh Gordon, who saw a team high and season high 9 targets last week, or I'm sorry, a high for his since coming to the Patriots and on the season altogether. You have Chris Hogan, Dorsett and Patterson didn't really get used at all, but they're still there. You have James White, you have Sonny Michel, who is also expected to play. Like, there are so many weapons on this team that, without, last year, no Rob Gronkowski would have made a big difference. This year, it's like, all right, well, he still has 400 other options to pass to or use in the run game.
It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, typical Patriots, they seem unaffected by anything, and you just rattle them off. So this is an interesting game. No Gronk. I think it opens the door. Edelman, obviously in play. Don't mind it there. Seems pretty safe. I think that's how they attack this Bears defense. If they're running the zone, get those quick passes out. Don't let Khalil Mack have time to get there. The guy that surged on my radar now that Gronk is sitting is Chris Hogan, who I somehow he finds his way back into the mix. He's done nothing all year. Last week was his best game. Caught all his targets, responded with a pretty good game. It's a sub 4K. I don't mind the spot there. And then if you want to look to the running backs, I think they both kind of have some red flags. I don't love the script for Sony Michel, and White is overpriced to me. I mean, he's pushing almost 7K. That's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, it is a tough pill to swallow. What do you think of Sonny Michel? Because, and by the way, just to go back one more time, because I'm seeing so much in chat about Chubb and Duke. Tournaments, what we're saying is that Duke has the upside to get it done. I just want to be very clear about this, okay? We're not saying fade Chubb and cash. That's all right. That's it. It's over. No more backpedaling.
I just want to say also, you will see Chubb on some of my tournament teams. I'm not full.
Correct.
I will be a lot of them. You will see Duke because I think that's a worthwhile pivot.
We wouldn't be doing you any favors if we were just giving you the one guy that everyone already knows is the most popular play and be like, yeah, play him everywhere. Why even watch the show?
No. Yeah, that's not useful in any form.
What are your thoughts on Sonny Michel? This dude's averaging, 22 touches over 22 carries over his last 2 games. Has 98 plus rushing yards in each of his last 3. Like, I said it before the season began. I love this guy, and I did believe that they were going to use him heavily. I know Rex Burkhead is out, but I'll take the win on that anyway. He's being used really heavily. I mean, really, really heavily. And you're talking about a game right now that has a 1-point spread. It is a road game, but no Rob Gronkowski. Again, however much that matters, I don't know. James White is really seeing not that many rushing attempts per game. Where are you at on Michel?
Yeah, I mean, the volume is going to be there. He's a little banged up, which isn't great, but he's going to play. I don't love it, though, to be honest. He's such a void in the passing game that you're going to need, if you want to play him, you know what you're kind of looking for. You're looking for, obviously, effective on the ground, but he has to find the end zone. He just has to, and that's why he's been effective these last couple games. I'm going to kind of jump off. Not that I was overly on him, their game against the Chiefs and whatnot, but I'm going elsewhere in this game. I think that Edelman and Hogan are kind of where I want to attack.
Yeah, by the way, just looking at red zone summaries here, red zone looks, not red zone targets, but red zone looks in general. Sonny Michel, since he returned in week 2, he has 2, 3, 6, 6, and 4. So in 5 games, he has 21 looks, either carries or targets inside the red zone. It's a very solid number, at least, Ben. So it does at least give us some hope that they get near the goal line, they get inside the 10. Sonny Michel is getting work, no doubt about it.
It's true. Yeah, no, I mean, it's not a unreasonable narrative to say that what you just said happens, that he gets his volume, he gets his looks, and if he takes advantage of them and he finds the end zone, he can return. The ceiling, I still think, is somewhat capped when you're that fragile in the passing game. Kind of feels like almost a fringe cash play that I'm not getting there to. So not for me. I get it, but I kind of hope for my sake that he doesn't find the end zone today. And then I think he could have one of those games, 16 touches, 77 yards, and he gets you 7.7.
For sure. On the other side, I know this disgusts a lot of people, but I got to tell you, man, Jordan Howard.
Oh boy.
I know. I'm sorry if I'm disgusting you already, Ben, but sometimes I have to look at things and look right now. I don't even know if I'm going to have any. I still have to recrunch and make these lineups again before lock, but he's still there's still a possibility that if Jordan Howard gets going early, the guy has 20 touches. So that's all I'm saying is kind of similar to Nick Chubb. Like Tariq Cohen had a big game last week, but he still only had 5 carries. He did have 9 targets, but the workload on the ground was dominated by Jordan Howard. This is a New England Patriots defense that has been, pitiful, and they're $400 separated on DraftKings. Just curious what your take is on that, assuming everyone is looking to get more Tariq Cohen into their lineups. Talk to me about Chicago's side of the ball, starting with the run game.
Yeah, I mentioned Tariq Cohen before when we were talking about Albert Wilson, and it's not the same situation, but he's another guy that I do think and he's a big play threat, so I get it. But man, the floor is really unstable. You're relying on limited volume to get there. And yeah, the game script could open up where he's the asset. I have some Jordan Howard. I'm definitely going to be over the field. I had some last week. It was not good. He lost a key fumble. It's a very dicey game because I think that the Bears are going to have to hang in for him to get there, and he's going to have to do the work early, so they lean on him. If it gets away, you're going to see Cohen take those targets, and that's a recipe for disaster. But with the ownership going to tilt in Tariq Cohen's favor, you can create a script that I think is very viable, using that the Bears defense and Jordan Howard do the heavy lifting today.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? No matter how much you hate a lot of players in this game, no matter how much the ball is spread around, excuse me, this game still has a 49.5 point over under, one of the highest on the day. Totally. So it's tough to say where the points will be scored from, Ben, but there will be points scored, I guess is what I'm saying.
Absolutely. And the Bears, it's kind of tough to peg. There's a lot of guys that I think you could, whether it's Trey Burton, Taylor Gabriel, but none of them have volume or target share so secure that I'm like, oh, well, they're going to get theirs. I think it's still pretty wide open for the team as a whole. So there's no reason that Jordan Howard can't take on a huge role. It's just there's a lot of scenarios where he's phased out, and that is scary.
For sure. And I may have missed this. I was reading chat, and if you mentioned it, just tell me. Mitch Trubisky, did you talk about Mitch? I was reading through our chat.
I try not to talk about him, to be honest. I don't like him this week. There's just so many quarterbacks that are in play that are sub 6K. I prefer Baker or a couple other guys to him. So yeah, if they fall behind and he's throwing, he's at home. I get it. Not for me though, to be honest.
All right, fair enough. And by the way, everyone's talking about the wind. There's like 5 games with winds of 12 to 15 miles per hour. So I'm really just trying not to let that influence much at all. Also from Allen Robinson is active. So you have that. Josh Gordon. I got to say, if there's one guy I want to go ahead and just be a little bit different, it would be Josh Gordon, I think.
Yeah. I mean, he's certainly starting to get more comfortable in the targets, the snaps, everything's trending upward. I still prefer the other two. If they try to work under the zone, he's more of a, throw it up and go and get it type guy. Maybe they can do that. But if it's the wind would, if there is wind, it would hurt a guy like that more. And B, the way that the Bears defense is set up, I think makes it a tough sell for him.
Agreed. I will say this much though. 22% snaps, 26%, 81% snaps last time out. Only Julian Edelman and Rob Gronkowski, who is not playing, played more snaps than Josh Gordon last week. So, yeah, there you have it. So if you're looking at least from a volume standpoint, 9 targets, 81% of snaps, that bodes well for him. Do we know how he'll be used? No, but that is very favorable if you're looking for someone that's trending at least in the right direction. And that's really all we can do here is give you the guys that are trending in the proper direction. So, All right, Ben, Buffalo and Indianapolis. Nathan 6 picks Peterman is so bad that Derek Anderson will be starting over him. Derek Anderson, the same one that actually built a rapport with old Kelvin Benjamin back in the day with the Carolina Panthers. T.Y. Hilton is back in action, healthy for this game. Ryan Grant has been ruled out of this game. T.Y. Hilton, someone that he was averaging he had 10 plus targets in every game until that game where he got hurt, and he still had 6 targets and 115 yards. He's always played better at home in Lucas Oil Stadium. I think that's at least worth pointing out. Buffalo's defense has not been bad, but Andrew Luck is pretty much on pace to break the all-time passing attempts record as well. So let's start with Buffalo first, just because it's such a ridiculous game.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty quick one for me to break down. Buffalo, Derek Anderson's terrible. No interest there. Kelvin, if you're really in a jam and you want to run it back, you could go there. You could go to Shady. He showed a little life, but overall, it's still the Bills. I think you're taking a lot of risk, and with all the value on the slate, you don't need to go there. So I actually have some Colts defense. And yeah, I have some Colts. Andrew Luck is throwing the ball, like you said, a ridiculous amount of times. don't mind pairing him up with someone. Hilton's going to draw Tre'Davious White, who is very, very good, but at home, still in play at 6,200.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. And when it comes to T.Y. Hilton, he's been moved around a lot. You look at where this guy is running his snaps. Tre'Davious White has played 3% of his snaps in the slot. Hilton plays a quarter of them in the slot. He moves around so often that I think we will be able to get away from him. But I also don't know if it's a great spot for him. I guess the only reason I mention him too is because 6,200 for T.Y. Hilton is, no matter the matchup, it is too cheap.
Yeah, the price is what kind of gave me some exposure to him. I'm not jamming him in cash or anything, which I think some people may look there, and I get it. I just tournament play at home. If they're certainly going to be throwing, I don't think that the Colts can lean on the run, even if they are winning at this point. So yeah, not too many targets.
We had a question about LaShawn McCoy. I mean, look, Derek Anderson honestly probably is better than Josh Allen and Nathan Peterman. But first of all, look at McCoy's home road splits since coming to Buffalo like several years back. They're insane. Just insane. I couldn't tell you why, but they are. And another thing too is there's a good chance this team's playing from behind. The only time I really ever feel comfortable playing McCoy is if it's a game like against the Titans where I think that he's going to get 20 plus touches because it's going to be competitive. And the only way they can keep any time of possession in their favor is by running it to McCoy. I don't see that being the case here today.
No, I mean, again, could Shady pick up the Saquon Barkley treatment and get a ton of dump offs? Of course he can. But I still, if you're really looking for that ceiling output, they're going to have to be more effective than I think they actually will be.
Right. I think that's the same case. Is McCoy a terrible play? No, there are just other running backs similarly priced, whether they are a little more expensive or cheaper, that I would rather play. Laugh all you want. I would actually rather play Jordan Howard if we're getting different over Shady at basically the same price. Let's talk Jacksonville and Houston, Ben. Sean Watson coming off a game where he was pretty dreadful from a fantasy standpoint. They did win that thanks to their defense against Buffalo. Blake Bortles equally trash in that game against Dallas where they got blown out 40-7. I don't think any of us saw that coming, at least not to that extent. And now you have Carlos Hyde, who is inactive. So you're going to see, one more big TJ Yeldon opportunity game. What are you doing with this one? Because this isn't a game that I have a whole lot of interest in. But I guess first I'll ask you, where's your thinking now on this Jacksonville defense after what we saw last week, after what we saw against Kansas City, so on and so forth?
Yeah, I have a lot of Jags defense today. They certainly some chinks in the armor. I still think for DFS purposes, it's all systems go. They still put pressure. They can force a ton of turnovers. And Deshaun Watson, as good as he shows some flashes, he makes a lot of mistakes. So it seems like a good spot if you can pay up and get them. Don't mind it. I don't have a lot from this game, though, to be honest. I didn't ultimately, and I get it if you want to be aggressive and take Deshaun Watson and pair him up with Hopkins or Fuller. No problem with that. I didn't do it. And then on the other side, I really Blake Bortles, he has some rushing upside. He can luck box his way into an inefficient, effective game for fantasy purposes. But again, you can't take every quarterback. With so many on the slate, he was towards the back of my priority list.
Yeah, me too. This game in general is not one that I really have a whole lot of interest in.
No, I mean,
again, you could look to guys like, I guess, Dede or Hopkins is always interesting because he's 6,900, which is just egregiously cheap. But are any of these price points enough to put you on these guys?
Not really. Outside of, they're in the bucket of when I make my teams with a core. If my last man in fits the price, I don't mind it. I could live with it. But in no way am I going out of my way to get exposure to some of these guys.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where I'm at too. Let's move on then. If you guys have any additional questions about something you think we missed, hit us up in chat, or you can hit us up on Twitter. Our Twitter handles are right below our names here on the screen. New Orleans and Baltimore. Here's another interesting one because we know that outside of New Orleans, this is not the same Drew Brees, not the same New Orleans Saints team. From an over-under standpoint, you have a what are we at, 49 right now, which for any time Joe Flacco is playing is pretty damn high, right? So let's start with either side of this one. You know what? No, let's start with Baltimore. What are you doing with this one?
Going back to John Brown, last week, just targets weren't there. They seemed content, and I totally get it, to look elsewhere. It was almost as if the Titans prioritized not letting John Brown get loose, and we saw Crabtree respond. They do that again, John Brown have another bad game, but I don't think that the Saints will do that. It should open it up for him. So I don't mind going back after he burnt everyone. Other than that, nothing else outside of some dart throws. Not interested in Collins or Buck Allen. I'm not going to Flacco. So I don't have a ton else from the Ravens side.
Neither do I. Crabtree was a guy last week that I was happy to run out there simply because he had been so bad, but was still seeing so many targets, and it was only a matter of time before he bounced back. Unfortunately, he did. But aside from that, it's kind of tough. I'm not playing Alex Collins. The Saints defense, according to Pro Football Focus, Football Outsiders DVOA metric, is actually ranked number 1. They have not allowed a lot on the ground. What about the Saints side? Drew Brees out of the dome in Baltimore against, we got to be fair here, this is a Baltimore defense that has been very, very, very good.
Yeah, it is. It's a very good unit. I'll say this. If you want to roll the dice and get away, similar to Kerryon Johnson, Nick Chubb, Kamara to Todd Gurley. No, not nobody, but after Mark Ingram came back, Kamara, we saw against the Redskins, wasn't utilized. I think more of that than not was just the game flow and just the circumstances. He got a big price drop. A lot of people are going to look to Gurley. I have some Kamara here in a spot that I don't think they're going to be able to run effectively up the middle. It kind of feels like a volume game where Kamara could get 12, 15 targets. And with him, I'll take my chances that he can turn a couple of those into monster plays.
I almost have interest in the Baltimore defense.
Ooh, I mean, you can go there, absolutely. We've seen Brees outside the dome be certainly a different player, but I just think for the Saints to move the ball, it's going to have to fall on Kamara. And
Sure.
with the ownership discount, with a guy that's a super high octane, kind of like that Tyreek Hill, where when he's low owned, it's so much more appealing for me.
Agreed. And obviously, if I'm running the Ravens D out there, it's because I have 24 remaining in my lineup, and I don't want to move someone else around just so I can pay up for a defense. This is not a priority thing. This is simply just, you know what? Ravens defense has been stellar. Can they get some sacks, maybe a couple of turnovers, and turn it into a 12, 13-point fantasy point game? I think it's doable. So that's where I'm at on that. But aside from that, I'm with you. John Brown would be the guy here. You never know. Maybe you get a Cam Meredith game at 3,800. I don't think you need to go there, but at all. But just throwing it out there, this game could be sneaky one where one or two guys produce and no one expects it, because still a pretty high total. But one of these defenses is very solid, and the other one, the offense, is pretty sketchy at best. So we got 2 games to go. I want to hurry it up because we have Chris Spags and Josh Engelman coming up next. So we'll get through this quickly. Dallas and Washington, Dak Prescott, Alex Smith. This should be great. I'll let you know what. I'm just going to ask you what you have on this one, because this is a game that I really just am not that interested in. You already have so many banged up players. Looks Thompson probably not going to play. We already know that Crowder's out. When it comes to Richardson, he's doubtful as well. I mean, there's just so many banged up players here.
Yeah, it's a mess. I don't have too much. Zeke, of course, is going to get volume. I think you could look there in cash if you want to, and you can afford it. Then on the other side, Jordan Reed, you talked about the target should be there just because of necessity. Not super into trying to guess will Doxson or Maurice Harris be effective. If you're in a real jam and you want to take a risk, sure, they're viable. But for me, it's kind of Zeke, Jordan Reed, move on.
Yep, pretty much for me too. Jordan Reed was really let me down last week. It was a game where he really should have put up decent numbers. He did see 9 targets as I expected, but failed to produce with them. Very disappointing. And of course, Vernon Davis is the tight end that caught the touchdown.
Yep.
Sometimes you just can't win there,
Yeah, I'm not going back to Vernon Davis. That honestly, yeah. I'm just going to double down on Reed.
Yeah, and I'm not going back to flash in the pan Dak Prescott, Cole Beasley either. No. For me, it's Elliott, because I think this could be a monster game for Elliott, and he could be one of those guys, as you mentioned, that is less popular than Gurley. So you have that. Aside from that, I don't have a problem moving on. Let's get to the last one and head out here. Rams and San Francisco. This is one that I do have plenty of interest in. You have the second highest total on the slate at 52. No Cooper Kupp. And you have just a bunch of banged up guys from both sides of this game. But it was great to see Marcus Goodwin get back into the mix. 4 receptions, 126, and 2 touchdowns last week. And now you're facing, Marcus Peters and a Rams secondary that has really just not been good at all. And figures that Marcus Goodwin's going to see a lot of Peters today.
Yeah, no, this is a good one. I'll just rattle them off. Obviously, on the Rams side, you could play basically anybody. Whether you want to play Goff, Gurley's, I jammed him in cash. I think most are. No problem with him in any format. And then, no Kupp is going to mean more Cooks and more Woods. So use them, mix and match them. They can score any way they want at this point. On the other side, Beathard, super punt, but he's going to probably play catch up, and he's been somewhat effective. You mentioned Goodwin. He's a burner, high octane. Yeah, Peters has not been good, and I don't mind trying to double down on that. He's sub 5K. Seems pretty good for a spot to target.
Yep, pretty much. Yeah, Gurley and Goodwin, my 2 favorite plays from this game. I think Cooks obviously and Woods obviously in play with Kupp, because that owners, it's so heavily concentrated there in terms of where Goff goes. Any thoughts on Josh Reynolds? Because we're obviously going to have some questions about him.
Yeah, I guess you can go there. The thing is, there's a lot of potential value on this slate, so it's not like I'm hurting for value. There's so many options. He's one of them, but not towards the top of my list.
All right, yeah, and snap count last week, Josh Reynolds ended up playing 62%, 55% the week before when both of those guys went down. So he's the clear beneficiary there. The only thing is, when you're talking about targets, well, you can't really expect them to see a whole lot, maybe 3 or 4 today. That'll do it for us on the game plan. Thanks for tuning in, fellas. We love y'all. Hit us with a like. It helps us keep the lights on, and we'll love you even more for it. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be back with you, Ben. I'll be back tomorrow, too, for NBA, the deeper dive, and my article. Be pumping the NBA article back out on awesemo.com. So, as always, we appreciate it. Good luck today. Stick around for Chris and Josh coming up next. Going to lead you up to lock. Ben and I will see you back here next week, next Sunday morning on the game plan. Have a great week 7, everyone.